Joe Jarvis is a pleasure to have as our guest this evening. Joe is a retired physician, healthcare administrator, and producer of Healing Us. There's a trailer in the email that you can take a look at to check out that wonderful documentary. Dr. Jarvis practiced family medicine at community health centers in Salt Lake City, Washington, D.C., and Reno, Nevada. He served as the state health officer in the Nevada Division of Health and as medical officer in OSHA, U.S. Department of Labor, and Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. Joe has published several articles in peer-reviewed journals and is the author of The Purple World, Healing the Arm in American Healthcare. Joe Jarvis, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Looking forward to your comments and conversation. Thank you, Joe.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, and good to see so many friends. I would like to give you a brief outline. I've got 20 minutes to make some presentation remarks, and I'm going to divide that into two parts. One, first I'm going to introduce you to the film that was just mentioned. The title of the film is Healing Us, and I'll introduce you by way of a history of how I got involved in that film, and we'll actually take a look at the trailer. And then I'll spend a second 10 minutes, so we're going to rush on both of these, giving you a brief history of the organization that I'm part of in Utah called Common Sense Healthcare for Utah. The organization exists to bring single-payer health system reform to the ballot in Utah. Our target date is 2026. So let's begin with the film for just a few short minutes. Back in 2006, I felt like I was finally making some progress in my advocacy for single payer, which I'd been at for about a dozen or more years by then. I had invitations to speak on the topic, mostly with the PNHP slide set, at least weekly, more often than that. I was publishing op-ed pieces on at least a monthly basis, again, sometimes more often than that. I received the nomination for the Utah State Senate in the downtown Salt Lake City area, which includes the capital of the state, as the Republican candidate, just by way of information. So yeah, I have been able to speak to Republicans at some. And as the Republican candidate, I was not favored. The incumbent was a Democrat. Salt Lake is one of the few areas in Utah that elects Democrats. But nonetheless, the Salt Lake Tribune endorsed my candidacy and suggested to the voters that they should vote for me. I also founded a 501c3 health policy think tank that year, which became known as the Utah Health Policy Project. And I thought it was going to spend half its time arguing about Medicaid and other current day issues, and the other half of its resources were to be devoted to promoting single payer. So I really thought lots of great stuff was about to happen. The sad part is I lost the election, and I also lost the think tank because the person I hired as the executive director, who was very good at grant writing, succeeded in getting a lot of grants, one, for instance, from Families USA and a variety of other places, and they dragged her away from single payer. And she argued behind my back, more or less, with the members of the board that they shouldn't set aside any resources for single payer. So eventually I ended up leaving. And ultimately, a lot of those speaking opportunities and op-ed opportunities disappeared over years, especially after the Affordable Care Act passed several years later. And I began to, back then even, began to worry that all of this effort wasn't amounting to much of a change in the conversation around healthcare. That was also the year, 2006, when Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth, came out. It premiered in Utah at the Sundance Film Festival and went on to gross $50 million worldwide. And some consider it to be a game changer, or at least a changer of the conversation about climate change. And I began to think that maybe I was not actually doing the right thing. I was talking to smaller groups. I was writing to, again, who read the newspaper? I don't know. And I was trying to campaign, and those seemed like all the right things, but I didn't feel like I was moving the needle. And here was Al Gore, who actually started his movie based on his talk that he was giving, his PowerPoint presentation, that had thousands of people, millions of people saw that, and it made a difference. So I began thinking back then that I needed to make a movie. One of the things that I was trying to do at the Utah Health Policy Project was reserve funds to create a documentary that I was hoping would be a conversation changer. And I actually raised money, a lot of it, more than $60,000 of it to start funding that film. 40,000 of those dollars I raised by going to my own religion, the LDS Church, which is a large organization in Utah, one of the biggest employers, and they donated $40,000 to the film. As I said, because that went to the nonprofit organization. When I walked away from it, all of that single payer activism disappeared with it. So I was prepared. I give you that brief history by way of telling you that I was prepared when an opportunity knocked on my door about 2 or 3 years ago, to look at a film as a very important part of advocacy for single payer. That opportunity, that film opportunity, came in the form of a young man named Kenny Ballantyne. He's a documentary film producer and director from the Sacramento area, relatively early still in his career. He'd already had some success. One of his films debuted at the White House during the Obama years. He got interested in a group of people in Washington State who call themselves the Red Berets for Medicare for All. He thought that was a fascinating story, and he got invited up by them to enjoy a weekend with them, do some filming, and get acquainted with who they were and what they were about. Long story short, they introduced him to a variety of people they felt he should meet and interview across the country. Wendell Potter, for instance, was one of those. And I was on that list. The reason I was on that list is because I had just before then published my first book on healthcare reform, which is called The Purple World: Healing the Harm in American Healthcare. And that book had been read by people in Washington, and they had called me and asked me to participate as a speaker in a book, a book club for 1 month. And that's how I got known to the Red Berets. And so Kenny walked into my living room intending to sit me down and do an interview and get some film. I instantly took a like to him. I thought he was a bright and capable person. I didn't know much else about him at the time, but as he described the project, I decided I wanted to get involved, especially when he told me that he was hand-to-mouth living and having to work to create advertisements in order to support himself. And so this would be a very prolonged documentary making process, and I wanted to shorten it. I felt like we in the United States have had plenty of long development processes around single payer, and we needed to do this sooner rather than later. So I came up with the funds to produce the movie in a more rapid fashion, and that's how I earned the title executive producer. The film is Kenny's, it's not mine, although I did sit behind him and watch a lot of the process, and he talked to me about the development process, but it's his film. And I'm really happy to have been associated with it. We actually, like Al Gore, tried to premiere our movie at the Sundance Film Festival, and it made the very second to the last cut. But our understanding is that there are long tentacles from the medical industrial complex, and they had some effect on which films actually finally did get screened there, and ours wasn't one of them for that reason. And that's apparently been an experience that's happened repeatedly in other film festivals around the country. I'll tell you in a minute how we are going to market the film, but first let's see the website. Mike has promised that he can share his screen and show you the website associated with the film. The website is about the network we're trying to create. Once the film is viewed, we think that people will be motivated to participate in organizations like the ones that you all are part of, including One Payer States, but also the local organizations like my own. And we hope that they'll be motivated to come to the network here online, find their state, and find the people who are already at work on single payer and join in with them. That's what we hope this will be, how this will be a catalyst. But let's start by watching the trailer. We are governed in American healthcare by the for-profit interests.
In a typical year in modern America, approximately 68,000 people will die due to lack of adequate health care.
Health insurance companies are in the business to make money, and they will do whatever they can to avoid paying claims.
The fallout is they would rather make a sale than take care of a patient.
If me and Danny lived in Canada, if me and Danny lived in Mexico, me and Danny would still be living in Canada or Mexico. They're not just numbers, they're people. And they're ripped from us because of our greedy healthcare system that puts profits before people.
This is a profit-driven business. They can be sued if they are not acting in the best interest of their shareholders, not in the best interest of the patients.
So the problem is greed.
The Democrats and the Republicans are both in the pockets of Big Pharma and the insurance lobby.
We're at a real tipping point.
The people in this country know the system is broken.
It's time for change.
Yes, that's Susan Sarandon, who's our narrator. We were fortunate to get her talent involved, and her name means something to marketing of a film like this. We believe that at the end of the film, as we built towards the end, we tried to give people hope, get them to see that they individually can have an impact on the state of reform, and that they can contribute and make something happen. We built towards that end, and then it's sort of like a call out to them. And we're hoping that they will follow that. Let's go back to the website, Mike. We hope they'll follow that by going to the healinusnetwork.com site, where they can get involved. Hit the get involved button right there, Mike. It's on the right. Yeah, right there. And then up official partners. They'll find a lot of organizations already listed there as partners with the film. And this just means that these organizations, their leadership has viewed the film in its entirety and has embraced it and endorsed it and said, yes, they want to have their logo displayed on the site. You can see One Payer States as one of those organizations. My organization in Utah, which we'll talk about next, is Common Sense Healthcare for Utah. We've got Healthcare for All Oregon up there already. There's a similar organization in Colorado, et cetera. We're hoping that every single organization, there's none from Connecticut yet. We'd love to challenge the people in Connecticut to take a look at this and see if they want to join in. And we'd like to see something from all 50 states. There's a map on the website where if someone wants to find out what's going on in their state, they can just click on the map, or they can come to this page and actually click the name of their state and find out who's active, and therefore find a way forward for themselves to make a contribution. We are rolling the film out by screening it first in various places. It will be premiering, the premiere screening will be in Tacoma, Washington on May 19th. Tacoma, because that's the home of the Red Berets for Medicare for All, and it's where the first set of video was filmed. And then the next night we have a screening also in Seattle. I'm planning to try to get one organized in July in Salt Lake City. The Denver people, the Colorado groups have already started talking about a July 11th date for themselves. We invite everyone across the country to consider helping us get the three things we need for a screening. We need a venue, of course. We need a host organization that can help us fill the seats. And we also need to have a little bit of funding help, a few hundred to a couple $1,000 in order to be able to afford to bring people who are part of the film, because we do a panel discussion afterwards to make the travel happen. So I'm throwing down the gauntlet here and inviting everyone to consider looking at it. Once the film premieres on May 19th, it'll be available on this website, as well as on the usual streaming services like Amazon Prime as a pay-per-view. You can rent it. You can also buy DVDs and Blu-rays. There's a variety of ways that it can be seen. And we hope that it will immediately become something that a lot of people want to watch and also want to have a screening. We will, if there's an organization out there that wants to view the film and see if they want to endorse it, get in touch with me, and I'll make it possible for you to see the film even earlier than May 19th. Okay, that's my 10 minutes on the film. And let's shift over to Common Sense Healthcare for Utah. What I've learned one of the things that I've learned over 30 years of advocating for single payer is that when you try to do it all yourself, you don't get very far. And when I moved to Utah, as a relatively recent convert to single payer back then, it was in the late 90s. I couldn't find anyone else in Utah who had an interest, and there was no other member of PNHP in Utah at the time. So I did start by myself and gradually got some friends, a few allies, some people from PNHP, one or two moved to the state and were here temporarily. So I did have some allies for a while, and built to the experience that I described in 2006, where I thought things were really moving forward and rolling. But then everything, happened as I described, and I felt again somewhat alone. After the Affordable Care Act passed, there was nobody asking for healthcare reform discussions anymore. It went silent. The oxygen went out of the room. So there were a number of years when I was busy anyway, serving as a bishop in my LDS ward here in Salt Lake City, when I wasn't all that active. But once I was released from that, I began writing the first book, published it in 2018. I had a couple of very good radio interviews, one with the public radio station at the University of Utah and another with BYU Radio in Provo. And that drew a bunch of new people into my orbit. Over the next couple of years, several of those people began agitating with me, saying, we can't just do nothing. We got to do something. So I organized an informal meeting of these people. It was about 15 of them who had come separately. They didn't know each other. They'd just come to me and said, I'm sick and tired of the way things are. We've got to do something. What do you think we should do? So we had this meeting. What I said to them was, the only thing I can think of to do in Utah is to advocate for a state-based single-payer program. And the only way to advocate for it is by ballot initiative. It isn't going to happen at the state legislature. We won't even get a hearing there. They swallowed hard. They knew how hard it was to do a ballot initiative, very expensive, hard to get over all the hurdles that are put in your way. But I basically said to them, it's either that or you pick something else to do, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take my time on something that's different from single payer, that's more incremental, and I'm not going to try to argue something at a legislature that isn't going to even listen. Either party, by the way, and will not listen. So eventually after 2 or 3 meetings, they said, okay, you're on, we're going to do it. So we decided to form a 501c4 organization. As a group, the decision was to name it Common Sense Healthcare for Utah. We do everything as a group. I am the chair of the board, but I don't run the thing. We do now have a part-time executive director because we fundraised among ourselves first of all and raised about $50,000. With that, we did a little bit of research on health expenditures in the state, and we began paying some of the professional that we need in order to write our health policy, write our bill. And now we are also paying a political advisory group to help us do our own fundraising. We're approaching the $100,000 total fundraising mark at this point, and that's after about 6 months of effort. Our goal this year is to raise $1 million. So we're not going very fast towards that, but that still remains our goal. We expect to have a local group in every health district, public health district in the state. There's 13 of them by the end of the year. And we expect to have our single payer policy completely written, threading the needle around ERISA, because we don't expect to see that legislation passed in Congress. And in order to really get it kicked off, we held a press conference in February at the state capitol during the middle of the legislative session when we knew we could get some press at the conference. And Mike's going to show you one of I've hired a videographer to come to all of these events because I'm actually now in the process of doing a second film that has more to do with, should I say, the right-wing sort of approach. I mean, talking to an audience that's not as progressive as perhaps is attracted to the first film. So Mike, can you move us to the website and go to that, to those clips from the from the press conference. Yeah, there we go. This is one of the stories that was told at the press conference. And the person who's telling the story is a member of the board of Common Sense Healthcare for Utah.
My name is Christine Helfrich, and I'm here today to tell you about my dear friend's daughter, Marissa, and what an initiative like we're going to discuss today could have meant for her life. I share her story with her family's permission. On December 11th, 2017, the Salt Lake Tribune featured the headline, quote, "The dirty, cough-inducing inversion fog hanging over the Wasatch Front might linger for weeks," end quote. The small particulate pollution hovered between orange, unhealthy for sensitive groups, and red, unhealthy for everyone. Hospitals and urgent care clinics were gearing up for a high volume of patients. On that same day, December 11th, 2017, my dear friend's daughter, 39-year-old Marissa Starr McDowell, was struggling with her asthma. She'd first been diagnosed at 4 years of age and had been a frequent patient at nighttime pediatrics and primary children's hospital throughout her childhood. As an uninsured adult, she resorted to ordering her asthma medications from India. Marissa loved her job at the deli at Harmon's grocery store and was affectionately known as Sunshine by her coworkers. Like many retail, restaurant, and tourism employees, she did not automatically qualify for health insurance from her employer. It took time and effort to work the number of hours needed to qualify. Marissa was looking forward to finally qualifying for health insurance in January 2018. But on that December 11th, Marissa's asthma symptoms became unbearable. She visited an urgent care at Holiday and was treated with a dose of steroids that evening. Her symptoms worsened. She went to the IMC emergency room and was admitted to the hospital. By December 13th, her oxygen saturation was at 88%. Marissa knew she was not better, but she was worried about her hospital bill. She decided to go home. IMC was experiencing growing inpatient volume, and the medical staff approved her discharge. She returned to her apartment. At 2 a.m., Marissa's roommate witnessed her collapse and called for help. Marissa died early in the morning of December 14th, 2017, leaving behind a heartbroken 13-year-old son, devastated siblings, and grieving parents and grandparents. Marissa did not have to die. If she hadn't been so worried about her hospital bill, she would have remained an inpatient and received the care she needed until fully recovered. The initiative being discussed here today would have allowed her to do that. And Marissa could have received consistent outpatient medical care throughout her adult life without having to rely on emergency rooms and asthma drugs from India. It is too late for dear Marissa, but it is not too late for the thousands of Utahns who cannot afford the health care they need. There is no boogeyman to blame for their health care needs any more than there was one person responsible for my friend's tragedy. It is our collective failure as a society to recognize that we all need a health care safety net. And it is only together as the people of Utah that we can finally do something about it. That is why I'm supporting this initiative, and I invite you to join me.
We had two other presenters telling brief stories, one another patient, this one the actual patient telling her story with ulcerative colitis and the difficulty she had in getting medication for that. And then a small business owner, a former congressional and gubernatorial candidate in the state, told the story of how difficult it is to maintain health benefits for her workforce of, I think it's less than 50 people. And I concluded the press conference with some brief remarks that documented the statistics about the cost of care in Utah. And I also cited a few of the findings of an informal poll we conducted with the help of Ken Friesoff, who's on the line today. And that by way of giving people some reason to believe that there's an electorate in Utah that's ready to pass on this. I'll read a few of those comments to you. People in Utah already feel that healthcare is expensive or flat out unaffordable. They also recognize that healthcare is not like other consumer goods. It is something that everyone needs and should have. In our preliminary surveys, by a margin of 97% to 3%, Utahns believe that healthcare should be made affordable for every family. And by a margin of 87% to 13%, they believe that we in Utah can make healthcare affordable for every family. I went on and finished off some of the other, and then invited everyone to participate. I asked people for their stories, because every family has a healthcare story. I asked them for their time, because we need people to staff those communication committees in every one of the public health districts in the state. And I asked them for donations, which they can give by going on to our website. And I'm asking you as well, because I would love to get startup money from all of you. I know you're all working on your own organizations, but I've donated to some of you, so maybe turnabout is fair play. Anyway, we are in the throes. We've got Jerry Friedman helping us with an economic analysis of healthcare in Utah and providing us with the underpinning, the economic underpinning for our proposal that we can, in Utah, can actually afford this. Once he's finished, we need to hire some lawyers with ERISA expertise so we'll properly thread that needle. And we need a few others. We've had a number of you, for instance, already interviewed with our policy committee, which is chaired by a retired internist. And I sit on the policy committee with him. We, as I said, we expect to have that all prepared close to the end of the year, this year. Okay, that's an introduction to both the film and to Common Sense Healthcare for Utah. I've taken my 20 minutes and I'm turning it back to Mike to field the question and answer time.
Over to Chuck.
Thanks so much, Joe. That was amazing. Yeah, really. And congratulations to you. And coming out of tonight, I hope that will be more wins at your back, wins in your sail. Just keep doing the work that you're doing. We're all in sync and solidarity with you. So thank you. Sam Metz with PNHP Oregon. Sam?
Thank you very much, Joe. Much appreciated your story, multi-decade story. There's the fact that you as a Republican working in a predominantly Republican state have pushed this ball, this massive boulder farther up the hill than any of us have in Democratic states. There's a lesson for us here, a couple different lessons. But my question is a little bit weedy and technical. We in Oregon occasionally talk about creating our own organization. How did you, for your organization now in Utah, seek, vet, and attract an executive director who could translate all of these important desires into real world activities?
The executive director is a woman named Emily Bingham. And I met Emily in 2020 when I briefly ran for Congress. By then, I had left the Republican Party and was running with a third party called United Utah. And she had run a congressional campaign, and she's a Democrat by and large, has spent her life working in Democratic politics. And I had actually met her when it was another physician in Utah who ran for Congress, and I think it was 2017, and I met her while she was running that campaign, was the campaign manager, and interviewed her, really decided she was willing to, because she loved what I had to say about healthcare mostly, she was willing to cross the party line and run my campaign. Now, I didn't stay in that campaign for very long. Turns out it's really, really difficult to raise money for a campaign when you're not either R or D. That probably doesn't surprise all of you, but I thought that I could overcome that because I'd already had a fair amount of donors for my previous Republican campaigns who I thought I could rely on in this case, and they just didn't come through. So I got to see her operating and managing a campaign then up close and personal, and I was very impressed. So when the time came to start our organization, I asked her to be a close ally, and I asked her to donate her time as the chair of our communications committee, which she did, and she did a wonderful job and really pushed this group, mostly of physicians who are the board, who are reluctant to get out in front. You know, they haven't done what I've done, which is for 30 years given these presentations and taken all the slings and arrows that you all know, because you've all done it too, that come along when you do that. So it wasn't just me that had to say to them, we can do this, you're okay. It was Emily who got in the room with them and said, look, I've run this campaign and I've done this, and here's my experience with this. And then it brought them along, and they could see that once we had the funds and we needed an executive director, they could see that she was the right person for the job. That's how she ended up being our executive director.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Joe. Let's see, up next, we have Barbara Pearson from Amherst, Mass. Barbara?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for all your work and what you've shown us tonight. I'm curious about the decision, if I understand, to use the public health districts as the, I guess, the organizing principle for your ballot initiative. Is that going to be right?
Yes, well, I just use them as a convenient geographic designation. We want to make sure that we don't lose focus. It's easy to find people in Salt Lake City, but we need to remember that in Utah, you don't get your ballot initiative on the ballot by collecting signatures in one county. You have to collect a number of signatures equivalent to 10% of the voters in the previous gubernatorial election in 26 of the 29 counties. So we don't want to forget that. And we need to have local people helping us all across the state. And I just use the public health districts because I'm a public health physician. I use public health districts as a geographic reminder.
And do they correspond to the actual districts, legislative districts that you need to have the 26 out of 29 for? I find in Massachusetts, I did a project and they don't.
No,
they don't.
It's we need signatures in 26 of the 29 counties.
Oh, counties. Okay.
Yeah, and the counties actually are divvied up into these health districts. So Salt Lake County is its own health district. So populous counties are just the sole county in the health district. But in the very rural frontier parts of the state in the South, there will be a half a dozen counties in a health district.
In a health district. Well, I guess what I was focusing on, and I'll try and make it brief, is just that even in my state of Massachusetts, which is pretty well organized and put together, we're now running a bill to strengthen our public health system that's been intensely weakened. And I know one of my colleagues from another organization from Colorado is on, and she had programs soon into the pandemic about how politicized their public health departments were. And I'm just wondering if other people have that same experience. I think it's a great idea you're not actually using your public health people, but I think it would be a great thing if you could.
Well, one of my more, after the press conference, we organized a 9-city tour. City's overstating it. You know, Salt Lake City is really a city, but a 9-town tour through the state, so that we would kick off getting it outside of Salt Lake County. And we will continue, and basically it was a listening tour. We were asking people come and talk to us. And we've now kind of shifted gears and started seeking invitations to speak. And one of the first ones came from the Utah Public Health Association. So I had a chance to speak to the 240 public health professionals who came to that annual meeting. This was the first one in person since the pandemic, and it was an overwhelming success. I have not specifically said we're going to use public health people, but I'm very hopeful that I actually had several people come up to me and say, "What can I do?" So they're somewhere, they're living, particularly if they're living in Moab or some other part of the state, we're going to take their time and whatever they can give us and put them in charge of giving us more speaking opportunities, having a chance to have cottage meetings, just get the ball rolling wherever they are.
Thank you.
Okay. Barbara, thank you for the questions, and Joe for the responses. We have Lou Sininger. Lou?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And it's good to see you again, Joe. I'm real, it's a pleasure. I've been working at this for, a dozen years also. and one of the things that comes out, and it seems to be in your movie, is those that don't have access to healthcare and how they are ravished and not treated right. Also, those that are underinsured, and this is taking a toll. But some of the people, the middle class, the working middle class that are making, let's say, $80,000 to $100,000 a year, they have their health care and they have enough money to pay for the out-of-pockets and all that. What are you doing, or how are you approaching this this situation? These people vote, but they're not hurting, and they don't necessarily, they feel sorry for the ones that are, but it's not them, right? So how do you approach those? Can you approach them by letting them know that they would save money? So that it's a whole facet of our, of our work that we're doing that doesn't seem to be covered.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering where you're at with that, Joe. Thanks.
So two things. One, it is a pocketbook issue. One of the things I cited in my press conference remarks was an August 2020 Utah Foundation report. Utah Foundation is kind of the premier nonprofit policy think tank on all kinds of issues, and they publish an annual or maybe biannual report about what's on the minds of Utah voters. And they always ask, they have a poll, they always ask, what's your priority as a Utah voter? I don't think it'd surprise this group. It's very commonly healthcare costs is the number one priority. And that was true in the 2020 report. They titled the report, Utah Priority Number One, Healthcare Costs and Accessibility. And they went on and detailed why it's so important, why it's on the minds of voters with a bunch of statistics, which I cited in my remarks at the press conference. And I always use those same statistics when I talk to any audience, because it gets right to the heart of what a lot of people think. That is, healthcare is a cost issue. It's a pocketbook issue. Right. And that's one. Yeah, you do have to address that. That's number one. But number two, I think, is more important and gets to the movie and the storytelling thing. You may know this already, but there were 8 red states since the passage of the Affordable Care Act and the action on the behalf of the Supreme Court saying that Medicaid expansion was not required. That states could do it, but they didn't have to do it. And of course, all Republican legislatures immediately backed away from it. 8 red states have seen ballot initiatives that expanded Medicaid over the objections of their legislature. The most recent being North Dakota, and one of them was Utah in 2018. There was a ballot initiative, and it passed handily, as it did in North Dakota. And the reason it passed, if you look at what happened, is the ads that were used were story ads. That were story about somebody who died or someone who was devastated in some fashion because they couldn't afford the care that they needed. In Utah, I know that will play right into the hearts and minds of those middle-class people you've just been talking about, who by and large are people with religious faith and belief, and who will be pricked in their conscience about that and will not want to leave it go. They voted for expanding Medicaid, and I am convinced they will vote for single payer on the same basis.
All right, thank you.
Terrific, Joe, and thanks for the question, Lou. I don't see any other hands raised, so let me just slide one in here myself, Joe. And that it's related actually to your response, your engagement with Lou, and that is how can folks, and disproportionately, I imagine that in Utah, folks identify as pro-life, quote unquote. How do you work that narrative, that frame, that push, that conscience tapper? I mean, through story you just mentioned, but how can folks hold that moniker, that frame, and yet turn against healthcare for all? How does that? What's been your experience in dealing with that?
Okay, so as I said in my introductory remarks, I served as a bishop in the LDS Church for almost 6 years. So I'm identified with that religion, which is thought of generally out there in the public as very, very strongly pro-life. But I'll tell you, as an insider, if you will, that the church's position on abortion is quite nuanced. There is a recognition that there are circumstances when it's the right thing to do. And that's what I use. I basically say, we're supporting a way for every single person to get all medically necessary care.
Right.
And if no one questions it further, that's how I leave it. If they ask more directly about reproductive health services, I go right at it. I'm very frank with them and say there are times when abortion is the medically necessary thing to do. So it has to be on the list, and it will be on the list.
Right. But pro-life that position should carry beyond the birth of the child, right? I mean, that's really also what we're talking about here. I mean, it seems like a hypocritical position to support life from conception to birth, but then stop being pro-life, right?
No, you're absolutely right. There is more to that story. You need to support the mothers throughout their pregnancy. In the film, there is a story of a woman who became pregnant, was on Medicaid, but on the special program for pregnancy that was basically actually healthcare for the child, not for the mother. So when she lost the pregnancy, the coverage from Medicaid ended, and she ended up having to not be able to get the DNC she needed, and eventually was billed for the ultrasound that documented that the fetus was dead. It's a very heartrending story, and you need to be able to say that to people. You got to support mothers, and you got to support children, not just during the pregnancy, because they'll have needs from then on, and that's what we're about. There's a lot that's needed, but we can afford it. We can do it. That's the whole pitch, and people buy that. We're big families in Utah. We have the largest average family size in the nation, and the youngest average population because of it. People are aware of the needs of children.
Thanks, Joe. We have a couple more hands up now. Ken Fishoff and then Barbara Commons. Ken?
A couple of things. It's really nice to listen to you, Joe, about this. I'm curious more about your communication strategy. You're talking about storytelling. There are issues with sort of how we talk about the policy side. And as a side question, are you finding that the term single payer sells well in Utah, or are you possibly, just like you're using common sense as your term for the organization, possibly going to use other language to describe the goal that you're talking about? Second thing is, we have a reproductive justice ballot initiative in Ohio that's going on right now, and in our state, you only need 3% of people overall, and only 1.5% from half of the counties. And you're saying you need 10% of voters. Did they raise that recently? Because that is an incredibly difficult number to reach. So I'm curious about the ballot initiative. I knew that you were successful on Medicaid in 2018, but it seems to me like this number, 10% and all but 3 counties, is a very, very hard hill to climb. So just a potpourri of questions and eager to hear whatever you want to respond to.
Yes. First of all, I use the term single payer with groups like this because everybody knows what it means here. And I don't have to, it's shorthand. Everybody's already on the page. That is not the case in Utah's general population. They haven't got a clue what that means. And if they have heard the term before, they have been schooled to not like it. So we don't use it. You will listen, if you listen to the video of my presentation at press conference, I never said single payer. You will probably not see it. I doubt you'll see it. I think we've tried to eliminate it from the website entirely. When I speak in public, I describe single payer, but I don't say it for that reason. And yes, the choice of the name, Common Sense Healthcare for Utah, that was explicitly done to avoid all kinds of what my group of board members and close allies felt were words that would immediately be a negative connotation. We're trying to stay with what we believe will resonate. And what we will need to do as soon as we have enough funds for it is we'll need to carefully poll about how to message this, which we plan to do that again as soon as we can raise the necessary funds to do it. So that's the answer to the question about single payer. Yes, the answer to your question about has the legislature been fussing around with ballot initiatives, making it harder? Yes, they have. And they did raise the percentage of votes required in the not too distant past. And they tampered with it again after the ballot initiative passed in 2018, expanding Medicaid. They were furious about it. The legislature in Utah is the dominant political entity. Far outweighs what the governor can do. The governor is a minor figure compared to the legislature. And they're making a lot of mistakes. It eventually the pendulum will swing back on them. But we will not be able to do signature gathering with volunteers alone. We will certainly have volunteers and we will try to have as many as possible, but we're going to have to spend money for professional signature gatherers because there's no other way to do it. And so we're budgeting in $2 million just for the signature gathering because they've made it that hard. It's just a fact of life here.
Thank you.
Great questions, Ken. Thanks, Joe, for those responses. Barbara, comments?
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much, Joe, for making this movie. I can't wait to see the full edition. One thing that I often talk to people about is the idea of disconnecting healthcare from employment. Okay, and I wish the unions would be front and center with this. But have you used that at all in your discussion with people? Does that ring a bell or anything with them?
Yes, particularly the small business owners and employees. They recognize that it's an onus that they are just not able to match up with. So they can see that there has to be an alternative way. So it does. And Utah's a small business state. I mean, most of the jobs created here are created by small businesses.
Okay, thank you. And how about the unions? Any union involvement with your program?
There is such a vanishingly small presence of unions in Utah that we haven't even, there are a couple, and we do need to reach out to them, but they haven't been first on our list.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that, Barbara. And maybe to build on that question of outreach, coalition building, Joe. Like, how would you identify some of your key partners? Seniors, vets, young people, other activists. What makes up your coalition for the most part?
Well, the first two groups that I've had some really good success with, and I know this in part because I've asked them to be the hosting organizations for the screening of the movie. It's a group called the Utah Alliance Coalition. It's a very progressive set of alliances that, I mean, what we're talking about are people in the climate arguments and other environmental groups. As examples. The LGBTQ community they're part of that coalition as well. So they tend to be very progressive. They have one group of leadership that sort of serves as the chairing for all of their shared activities, or at least their shared interests. And they they saw the movie in its entirety and then instantly endorsed it. Their logo is up on the Healing Us Network website, and they will help me sell the seats to what we hope will be a 300-seat auditorium on July 10th. Another one is a caucus. It started as a caucus of the Utah State Democratic Party called the Healthcare Caucus. They have changed their name from the Democratic Healthcare Caucus to the Utah Healthcare Caucus, and have tried to establish a semi-independent status separate from the Democratic Party, because they feel like, and I agree with them, that healthcare is a nonpartisan issue, or maybe you should better say it, a bipartisan issue. And they likewise are an easy, low-hanging fruit sort of group that I've already started to connect with. But I have a committee from the board, and this is all done with volunteer work from board members, a retired pediatrician whose job it is, and his committee to do outreach. And he is going around seeking, he started with physician groups, but he's now branching out to other health professional groups and business groups, and asking for opportunities for us to speak or to table at their meetings. He and his group have gotten us a table at the Pride Festival that's coming up in June in Salt Lake City. We'll be at the Ogden Surgical Medical Society meeting in a couple of weeks with a table. They're the ones that put a table at the Utah Public Health Association, which we could drive. I could say to the people that I spoke to, go see our table and come and sign up with us. We at that public health meeting, we ran into several other groups that were also tabling, and they've invited us. So the avalanche is starting to occur.
Terrific. That sounds like you're hitting on most cylinders. That's great, Joe. Appreciate that. Let's see, Sam and then Mike. And Mike, I guess are we looking to wrap up soon, or we'll just go until we exhaust all the questions? And Joe, we want to honor your time as well.
We're scheduled
I'm here as long as you want to hear me.
Okay.
We're here till 6:30.
Okay, just clarifying. And that one group, though, we're beginning to stretch our thinking on is disability rights and disability justice community, right? Disability. So arguably, it's the largest adversely affected community hitting on health issues. It's not just physical, right? It's mental. It's also spiritual as well. So the disability rights folks. Sam, and then Mike.
Thank you, Joe. Just to amplify one of the topics you mentioned, what are the professional business organizations in Utah that you have attempted to make contact with, and what has been their response to your outreach?
When we were in Moab for the 9-town tour, Moab is a big tourism town. There are 3 major national parks within a stone's throw, so to speak, of Moab. Lots and lots of tourism sort of businesses, and we had a preliminary encounter there. I expect that that's going to end up being a very fruitful encounter, because the people who work in tourism in the service industry, they by and large do not have health benefits to their work. And towns like Moab, which have a hospital that struggles financially, and similar smaller places all across Utah, especially in the south part of the state, where there are 5 national parks and millions annually of visitors during the summer months, they struggle to meet the healthcare needs of those people who are out there in the wilderness and get injured and otherwise adversely affected by their wilderness experience. So I think we're going to find, here I'm being my usual rose-colored glass sort of person, an optimist, but I think we're going to find a lot of support there. It's going to be very important, because that's our into the business community. We already have a builder. The person who spoke at the press conference is a small individual house builder. That's what her small business does. And so we expect to be able to use her connections. The governor has started a health reform process. If you want to call something that has a 15-year time horizon, health reform, it's called One Utah Health. And we have a presence through her, the builder, and through a county commission employee who's one of our close allies up in the north part of the state, Logan. So we'll find more people in the business community through that experience as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Mike?
Yeah, Joe, I have a friend in town who is a Marcus Welby type of guy, a family practitioner. And I gave him your book and didn't get much response. And I was disappointed. And I'm wondering, within the LDS, is there sort of a feeling of self-sufficiency and a sense of self-containedness that there isn't a lot of interest in governmental support for safety net services like healthcare?
Yeah, this is a discussion I've had with Don McCann in the past. The history of the LDS Church vis-a-vis the federal government is not a happy one. You will all remember, maybe you won't, but there was a period of time when the LDS Church officially had a policy of polygamy, and that became a major negative focus nationally, resulting in a lot of legislation being passed, and many of the leaders of the church, the men, were eventually imprisoned in the late part of the 19th century. But it wasn't just that. Not long after the Mormon pioneers arrived, about 20 years later, just before the Civil War started, there was enough animosity back east against LDS that they sent an army, Johnson's army, out. And there were plans made by the LDS Church to burn every single barn all across Utah in order to not leave anything for the federal government. That's the start of the relationship. It has taken 100+ years for there to be some feeling of mutual understanding. So government, especially federal government, is not a welcome sort of thing. I could tell you how many ways this shows up. One of my good friends, an active member of the LDS Church who served in Congress for 3 terms, told me a story about how he went to a community meeting, and it was one of his town halls, and he was taking questions from the audience, and an elderly woman stood up and said, "I need you, Congressman Orton, I need you to get the government out of my Medicare." But that's the level that we're talking about. They can't even recognize a government program that's really quite popular for what it is. I know from experience that Medicare for All is a non-starter in Utah. I cannot have a movement based on that. That's why it has to be state-based. It has to be, because I will never get it if I'm talking about something else. And even the state government sometimes is viewed askance. Now, in terms of people who are like LDS people, religious and faith-oriented, I would recommend at least taking a look at the second book I wrote about health system reform. That book is called For the Hurt of My People, and the subtitle is Original Conservatism and Better, Simpler Healthcare. I go to some length in that book to cite the scriptures. I use only biblical scriptures because I'm not intending it to be exclusively an LDS audience. The scriptures that support the idea that we should be taking care of every ill and injured individual. That is what we should be doing. And that I've found has helped some of my LDS friends get past. Because yes, if it's a religious thing, if it's a faith-based thing, yeah, they can see how it has to be done.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike, and thanks, Joe. I don't see any other hands raised, but how are you feeling, Joe? Are you feeling pretty good spirits? I mean, you've got a lot on your plate. I feel like we're brothers from another mother. You've got so many things going on.
I am, I told you about how I felt sort of uplifted and like things were going well in 2006. I feel that energized again this time, but it's all this time there are people surrounding me who will have their own independent thoughts and actually get busy and act on them. We have a board meeting every month in which we share with each other what's going on, where we are, and what we need in our various assignments. And I'm amazed at what gets accomplished by this group of people, who have, none of whom were single payer people before they met, together informally. They really had to swallow hard to accept it. Many of them were quite skeptical about it. But as the data keeps rolling forward, as we get more economic information, they get more and more persuaded, and they know that we can't stay where we are. That is what is really energizing me right now, is to watch these people kind of come along into the movement and bring their families and bring their friends with them. It's just amazing.
Thanks for providing that vision, inspiration, and documentation and evidence for what it is that you're doing. And congratulations again on the film. If you want to pitch that for anybody who maybe came in late, what it is that you want folks in our audience tonight to do to support the work that you're doing in Utah, you can maybe just review that for a minute or two, and then put a bow on the evening's event. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, just to reiterate, the film is intended as an instrument to help this movement expand, include lots of people that so far aren't part of us, because we want it to use it as a way to draw people in. In order to do that, we have several ideas. One is organize a screening where you live. We will bring the film and help you do that if you can do three things for us. Find a venue. We have a venue in Tacoma where the premiere will be held that has 125 seats, so that's fine. We have a venue in Salt Lake City that I'm trying to work on that has 300 seats. That's of course harder to fill, but that'd be fine too. So you'll know venues better than we will. That's number one. Number two, have sponsoring organizations who can help us sell the seats, get people in the seats so they can see it. And then we will bring our group with us. Many of the people that you see in the film will come and participate in the panel discussion afterwards, tell their stories again, help people connect better with the film, and they will hopefully leave with their own copy, which they'll be able to purchase while they're there. Or if not that, then they know where to find it online and be able to see it that way and show it to friends and family. But we want them to connect with you. So we want them to know who you are locally and what your work is, and that's how this movement grows. So we need a venue, and we need some support, and that includes a little bit of funding to help us with the travel expenses. Until the film takes off, I hope that we do like Al Gore did and gross $50 million. But until we do that, I need a little bit of help with the financing of getting the group around to the various parts of the country. And in terms of Common Sense Healthcare for Utah, anyone who would like to send us a few dollars can donate on the website.
Okay.
Terrific, Joe. Thanks so much. If you have a chance, just drop your link in for a final time in the chat if you're able to do that. Or Mike?
Catherine has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Catherine. Hey, Catherine.
Hey, can you hear me? I can't figure out how to turn my video on. I'm sorry, I'm on my phone.
You're good.
I just wanted to agree with Dr. Jarvis regarding Medicare for all. And I kind of think that what can we do to try to encourage maybe the Medicare for all movement to look at it being a collection of states, with each state having different plans that fit to their state, and having it be a more decentralized program. I think that is the way to go, personally.
I always make sure to tell people who ask about this, who are concerned about why aren't we actually working for Medicare for all? I always make sure to tell them that is the goal. I don't want anything less than healthcare financed for every single American wherever they live. I'm arguing in favor of something to start in Utah because I think any state that actually gets over this hump is going to make it possible for other states to follow, and soon thereafter, it will be a national program. That's what I tell them.
Thank you. I agree too. Thanks.
Terrific. And thanks for your work, Catherine. Appreciate you.
Excuse me, I have one last question. This has been a very good presentation, and I would like to know how, if I can get a recording to pass it on to a couple of very important people in healthcare for all Oregon.
Yes, I will send the recording out within the next 24 hours. And Dr. Jarvis has graciously agreed to speak to our Mid-Valley Healthcare Advocates on May 22nd.
Wow.
And so you'll get an invitation to that as well.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Mike, any other announcements for this evening? Just to let folks know that we have a working group at One Pair States. We interface with the Healthcare Legislative Aid for Congressman Ro Khanna in an effort to get the enabling legislation, to get our states the support they need to move forward with creating universal healthcare systems. So just know that that's the work that we're doing concurrently with all this other. So any support you can throw in the direction of One Pair States makes it a little bit easier for me to travel down to DC and do that kind of work with members of Congress and staff. We have on the third Friday, May 19th, is our next One Pair States monthly meeting. We'll have a special guest. We almost have them locked up right now. We'll let you know when we get the word out on that, but just stay tuned. Where Mike has put out word for a Noam Chomsky event next Tuesday, the 16th. Keep an eye out for that. And anything else, Mike, you can think of?
No, I think that's it. I'll send out an extra invitation to the Noam Chomsky event. It's sponsored by the OSU Department of Public Health and Dr. Chen-Wei Chi. And it will be in person for some people, but Noam Chomsky will be attending online. But at Oregon State, there will be an audience that can, pose questions and have discussion in person as well.
Okay, terrific. And also just to let you know that the time frame for introducing or reintroducing the state-based universal healthcare is going to be after Labor Day, in order to give plenty of space for the reintroduction to the Medicare for All bill by Pramila Jayapal and Bernie Sanders, which is targeted for May 16th. Right now, we're supporting the efforts of our partner organizations to get as many members of Congress, both in the House and Senate, signed on with both of those bills as original co-sponsors. So keep an eye out for those announcements as well. And again, thank you for supporting the work we do. Joe Jarvis, always great to see you, Joe. Keep up the fight, and everybody keep going, do all the great work that you're doing. Thank you.
Lynn has a question.
Yeah, I was just on a Medicare for All Connecticut call, and a Dr. PhD Erica gave us an update, and it sounds like they bumped the 16th to the 17th for the bills. So double check your website, but it sounds like they've moved it ahead a day.
Maybe that was to honor the Pennsylvania primary. We have a big primary on May 16th here, so maybe that was part of it. But okay, May 17th. Thanks for the update, Lynn. Appreciate it. Everybody have a great evening. Thank you again so much.
Thank you so much, Joe. Good to see you, and great to hear the great work you're doing.
Well, thank you. Nice to see you too. Bye-bye.
Okay. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Mike. Hey, David. All right. I will get on to that July document, Mike. I just got slammed when I got home tonight. So I think we're still recording.